if these numbers are off, it's not that just, well, we don't have the ideal kind of conditions for life. It's that, like, planets don't form, stars can't form, chemistry can't be done. Like, there would be just nothing.
Hey guys, I'm Bill Westers, and this is the Encountering Truth podcast. Welcome to the Encountering Truth podcast, where we examine the evidence for Christianity, engage culture with kindness and conviction, and encounter Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. Today, I'm honored to have my friend Dan Ermutlu join me here on the podcast, and Dan has an apologetics ministry called Apologetics 517. And we first met through the Michigan Apologetics Network, and then we've gotten to know each other a little bit more through some regular meetings and mentorship apologetic stuff with our mutual friend, Dr. Doug Groteis. And so Dan actually teaches an apologetics course at his church in Central Michigan, and he has another session ready to start up here pretty soon. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, kind of dive into some general apologetics and some key topics here and there. And so really just to look at some tips and strategies for making the case for Christianity. So welcome, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bill. First of all, you got my last name right, and I know we talked through that, but congrats, man. That's a small club. That's a small club you're in.
Victories,
there's a T-shirt or a hat in it for you, I think.
Thanks. All right, well, why don't you just start on telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe how you got into apologetics, started Apologetics 517, and even maybe a little bit about that apologetics course that you teach.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I'll start way back. Sure. We'll go in the way back machine. So I grew up in a Christian household, raised a Christian, was far from God at one point, probably just after high school, around the time when I was in the military. A few years later, I meet my wife, we get married, have a kid. That's around the time when both of us sort of decided, yeah, we need to get back going to church again. We need to put first things first, and really recommit ourselves to the faith. I mean, especially after having a kid, recognizing that we're going to have to teach this kid, like, what is the meaning of life? What's the purpose? Why are we here? There's going to be a lot of tough questions that we don't know the answers to. So, we recognized there was definitely a need. So, started going to church again. As during this time, kind of in the few years that followed, having some really great conversations with people. Had some great conversations with my brother. He's probably the biggest single factor in this ministry existing, whether he knows it or not. So, but yeah, I would describe him as a sort of devout atheist, just absolute, unshakable, resolute, which is amazing because we grew up in the same house. We were both raised in a Christian household.
Oh, that's interesting.
I turn out this way. He kind of goes a different direction. But yeah, so we would have just really great conversations and debates going hours and hours on the phone. And he would ask amazing questions, really, really good questions about evil, about free will, about just all of these different things, about history. And I mean, a lot of these I had no clue. I was completely unprepared for. I didn't. And the fact that he's sort of attacking these beliefs that I hold and that I have no good reason to sort of be able to back any of this stuff up. Yeah, that just led to a lot of frustration. Led to me, frankly, reacting in ways that are maybe unchristlike. Let's just leave it at that. The spirited debate got a little too spirited, and I would just, sort of say, "Well, shut up, you big jerk." That's maybe not the way to go. So yeah, I mean, but it did lead me to say, you know what? These are great questions he has. And now that we're not on the phone and I don't have this, facade I have to put up, what is the answer to this question? I don't know. It never occurred to me to even ask it. And so, no, I can't just let it go at that. I need to go find an answer. Look, my brother's smart and all, but he's not the first human to have come up with this idea. This must have been asked before. So as I start researching, I find out, there's some material on this, and there's these guys called apologists. I don't know what that even means. I think it's like a minister or something.
They say sorry a lot.
Yeah, I've never heard.
Apologizing.
Yeah, I've never heard of the term. I've never heard of any of it before, even though I was raised in the church. But as I started listening, watching some of their content, reading some of the books, I'm like, man, this is just a treasure trove of stuff, and this is not a new phenomenon. Like the church has been like these things Christians have been grappling with for centuries, for millennia. Like, all right, so that's great stuff. I discovered William Lane Craig. I discovered J.P. Moreland. I discovered countless others. Sean McDowell, J. Warner Wallace, like Greg Kokel, Frank Turek. I just started studying. Got a certificate in apologetics through Biola. I eventually, just recently, finished a certificate program through Trinity in religious studies. But it made the conversations with my brother just go way better because I have it's a whole different approach to it now rather than just being an argument or a debate. I ended up going back to him well after this and just seeking first to understand, well, what are all of your objections? Just lay it all, like everything that's standing right now between you and saying yes to Jesus and saying, giving your life to God. Like what is everything? Down to the most minute, meaningless detail. Look, and frankly, let me write it all down. I want to actually copy every single thing down because it means that much. It is important.
Yeah.
And I want to give it the importance it deserves. And so just listen to him, and I'm like, okay, and fleshed out, well, by that, do you mean this? Okay, yep, that's a good one. And I was like, look, I don't have all the answers to all these, but I think there are answers. So over the next few months, let's knock some of these out. I'll do some research, you do some research, we'll talk about this. And we went through all of those. We ticked them all off the list. Eventually we get down to, well, what about this? Well, we actually already covered that one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, what about this? Man, we talked about that one too, so where are we left with? I feel like you're out of excuses, we're out of reasons. So it wasn't too long after that, he actually did become a Christ follower. He gave his life to Jesus and praise God, I was actually able to baptize him. And that's an honor and a privilege. Yeah. Like, I don't deserve, like a lot of people, you evangelize, you minister to people, you try and share Jesus with people. You don't always get to see the fruits of that labor. Right. It's just been an absolute blessing that I got to be a part of that, to see, wow, the finished product. Like, that's amazing. God did a real work in him.
That's awesome. Some plant the seed, some water it, and some bring in the harvest. Yeah. And you got to kind of be part of all of that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Just amazing. Anyway, so that was sort of the genesis of, I felt God's calling that I've gathered all this information that seemingly no one around me, no one in the church knows about. And I just felt a strong calling that I've got to do something about this. I can't just sit on this and not share this goodness with other people. Right. If I am going through this, if my brother was going through this, I guarantee that other people are going through it just quietly to themselves. And it's just such great information. So I over the course of year and a half, maybe 2 years, put together this 6-week course. There's sort of presentations that go along with it. And it pulls from a bunch of different resources and books and materials that, I have read that have fed me. This is not a bunch of original Dan Ermutlu genius content. I am not that much of a I would be, what they call like a $1 apologist. I steal and borrow from much smarter people than myself to say, hey, look, here's some smart stuff. And then I recommend a lot of books. We normally give away some books and stuff during that too. Cool. So.
Yeah, I like that that relationship all the way through, and then answering some of those questions, kind of like, what are your questions? Because it's like Christianity's been around for going on 2,000 years now, and so chances are some of these questions have come up. There's nothing new under the sun, and there's also then probably answers for them, because if they've come up and Christianity's still around and not been, oh, well, there's the nail in the coffin, there goes Christianity. No, it's like it's throughout the years, it's all these things have been answered. And so when people come up with these brand new, what they think to be brand new arguments, it's like, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
You're not that special.
Come on.
So yeah, there's answers, and I think that's a pretty powerful story that you have there. But and I love the idea of this class that you're teaching. That you put things together in a structure for it, kind of walking through things. That's what it's all about, is leaning on other people that have gone before you, leaning on other people that have done the research, being able to pull from that, recommend that. I mean, that's what, we do here all the time, is always recommending resources, right? So so before we go any farther, is there we're kind of maybe walk a little bit through what do you teach in that course, but some people might be thinking, okay, well, can I take the course? Is there a way? Is it completely just in person, or is there a way for them to take it online, or what?
So, okay, here's the bad news. There's no online version of this. There are, at the very end of my course, I provide a couple of online resources that are kind of like courses. Okay. One is through Reasonable Faith. I think it's called Equip. Okay. And then there's Stand to Reason has... I think it's STR University. Mm-hmm. And as far as I remember, both of those are free. There's another one that's cross-examined that they put out a number of courses. I think that those are paid.
Online Christian courses. I
think, there's a number of paid. But so there are courses. I mean, I took a certificate program through Biola. There are certificate programs through a lot of different places. You can do online apologetics courses. Right. Mine is not really online, at least not yet. Okay. I have been encouraged to maybe record kind of what I do in the course, put it online. That's not available yet. We do have a YouTube channel, and I have spent a great deal of time curating playlists. Okay. Once again, borrowing, stealing from people way smarter than me, putting their videos, organizing into different sort of categories. And so you'll have categories like, why apologetics, mm-hmm. which covers what is apologetics, why should we even think it's important or bother learning any of this stuff. There's arguments for the existence of God, and there's different playlists for each specific one. There's, the problem of evil and suffering. There's a whole playlist just for that. So, you could look at my YouTube channel right now just as an additional resource where I've compiled some stuff that people can go to.
Well, awesome. Well, hopefully I think it'd be a pretty awesome thing for you to one day be able to do some recording and compile your course and make it available online. But so I guess what that means then is that we're just going to have to do our best to kind of cram it. How long is it normally?
So
6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks. There's 6 sessions to it. Each session is about 2 hours, sometimes a little over. Sometimes we rabbit trail and go a little bit, the other direction. One of the other special things about doing it in person, sometimes the apologetics is not super straightforward. There are some weighty subjects. There's some philosophy in there. There's different things that you've never really considered before. A lot of people have never really considered before. And so, it's really good to be in person and be able to ask questions and talk through some things. Mm-hmm. And so I try and allow a lot of sort of break points during each session to say, okay, is everyone still with me? Do we have questions up to this point? Let's work through that stuff now before we move on to the next. Nice. Doing stuff online, if it's just a pre-recorded whatever, good luck with that. Right, yeah. So there's a certain value in being able to do it in person, and for sure. It is a free course. I don't charge anything for it. So I mean, if you go to a church that's roughly around within a certain distance from, say, Lansing, Michigan, I would be willing to maybe come do it at your church.
There you go. Okay.
But yeah.
All right. Well, we'll try to cram in some key points and 12 hours down to about 45 minutes.
Sure.
Here, right. So
I'll talk fast. Here we go. Let me get some coffee.
No, we'll just focus on some of the key aspects. So, first of all, you kind of shared why you started, but and really you've kind of shared what your belief about the importance of apologetics is. But can you give us maybe a little bit of a biblical basis for apologetics?
It is in the Bible. No, there's so 1 Peter 3:15. That's kind of the one of the foundational scriptures that we're talking about. In your hearts, honor Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks for the hope that you have.
Exactly.
I think when you really break that sentence down, it's not just be prepared to tell people about the hope that you have. It's to make a defense for the reason for the hope that you have. And if you work through that sentence methodically and really just stop, what does that mean? Okay, so it's not just about telling people about Jesus. It's about also making a defense for why you think Jesus should be their hope anyways. That's two different things. That's not just here's what we believe, but also here's the why. That word defense is where we get the term apologetics from. It's apologia. And the sort of connotation there is a systematic, rational defense. You see that word in, as it relates to like a court, proceeding, like a defense case. So yeah, it's not just a suggestion.
Right. I mean, even Jesus was performing miracles as evidence, and even I think in Acts chapter 1 it talks about how he went around doing many convincing miracles, and so it's definitely something that we should be prepared to do as Christians, to be able to give a reason for the hope that we have, to make a defense. But so trying to cram all 12 hours or so into an hour podcast, how would you do that? What would you start with? What do you think would be like maybe the first or the most important thing to make the case for Christianity? What would you start with, or what do you start with in your course?
So in session 1, we talk a little bit about why apologetics. We also touch on the idea of truth. I think that's important. If you don't at least get on the same page that there is such a thing as objective truth, it's not you can have something that's true for you, I can have the opposite that's true for me, and we'll just enjoy our own truths and not bother each other. That's not really reality, though. I prefer that 3 + 3 = 11. You know what I mean? That's these are not objective.
It doesn't play itself out well in reality.
No. So we talk about the idea of truth as being an objective thing. It is not subjective. When people talk about subjective truths, they're really just talking about their own perceptions or their own preferences or opinions. I'd say I would argue there is no such thing as subjective truth. Truth by nature is objective. And so, that's kind of a big part of it going into it. But I think before you get into anything about Jesus, the resurrection, New Testament, really trying to prove that Scripture is God-breathed, that it's infallible, inerrant, anything like that, you have to approach the concept of God. Is there a God? Because I don't know how much sense it makes to try and argue that Jesus is the Son of God I just don't believe that there's any God.
Right.
What does that mean to me that he's the son of something I don't even think exists? This is a meaningless conversation. So by going back, giving some arguments for God's existence, that's what we do in session 2. We talk about the fine-tuning argument, and we talk about the moral argument. When I first started teaching the course, instead of fine-tuning, we actually did the clam cosmological argument, which I still love. It's one of my favorite arguments. For whatever reason, it is not most other people's favorite argument. I think it's there's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of science in there, and it's a very straightforward argument, 2 premises, a conclusion, but in giving data to support those premises, it can get kind of in the weeds, a little heady, and people maybe just kind of start zoning out. So we switched it up and started doing fine-tuning instead, which I think really grabs people a lot more. It's a lot more science. We kind of talk about the multiverse briefly in there, which I think is, there's a lot of popular level movies and stuff that talk about the multiverse. So everyone at least knows that and can sort of, and then the moral argument, I think hits a lot of people where they're at. It's a provocative, in a good way, sort of argument. Because the claims that we're talking about in there, we're going back to the idea of objective versus subjective. And we're saying, is morality something that is objective, or is it something that is subjective? Is the truth of a moral value or duty, as moral claim, is it found in that thing itself, or is the truth found in the subject?
Right.
And so if we want to say that something is objectively wrong, then it is outside of ourselves. That truth exists in that thing. What grounds that? Why would that truth be?
You have to have a standard to measure it against.
Exactly.
Rather than your own personal preference.
Right. Versus, well, if you want to retreat from objective morality and say, well, okay, maybe that points at God a little too much. Maybe it's just subjective. Maybe we just sort of live by our own compass, our own sense of right and wrong. Well, that's a way to go, but there are certain ramifications you have to look at. If we're all our own sort of measuring sticks, I can't really condemn what you're doing is wrong. All I can say is, well, if I were to judge him by my own measure, he would be wrong. But by his measure, he's doing just fine. You couldn't really condemn the Nazis as being evil, as doing evil things. I mean, there were the Nuremberg trials, right, where they did in fact condemn the Nazis as evil and found them guilty of war crimes. I mean, you would just go back and sit and think about that if morality is subjective and each society sort of gets to decide for themselves what's good and bad, right and wrong, then how did the world court have any jurisdiction to come to Nazi Germany, overthrow them, and then put them on trial for war crimes against humanity? I mean, if you look at some of the, opinions that were given after the fact on that, of the reasons why they found them guilty, they specifically said, like, yeah, we're appealing to a sort of higher moral authority. To say that morality is subjective and that we're all sort of our own measuring stick, I mean, you would have to look at that and say, well, then the people that put them on trial were the ones that were being evil there because they were forcing their own morality onto the Nazis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so
you try to break it down by culture, it's like, well, it's okay in that culture to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not okay in this culture. Then we'd have to say that the Nazis and their culture and their society, that, well, hey, that's okay for them. But if we are going to say that it's wrong, we have to have something to compare it to rather than our own culture.
Right.
Right? Because then we're trying to make ourselves, in a sense, God and
we
the
are
standard
the standard
of morality.
Yeah.
And so everybody else, has to conform to our standard. And now it still becomes a relativistic type of thing. And like, who gets to say it's our culture that gets to say what's right and wrong,
Yeah. Well, the idea of progress, right? Moral progress. So, a few hundred years ago, slavery was legal. It was normal. It was part of society. Today, I think everyone in the U.S. would look at that and say, yeah, that was wrong. We shouldn't have done that. But how could we possibly condemn that as being wrong if the prevailing thought at the time was that it was right? All we could say is that, well, today we're different.
Right.
We're not better, we're not worse, we're just different. We decided to take a different path. It's not better. It's just different. You couldn't actually say, no, it's better today. We started here, now we're here, and we're approaching this level of perfection because, well, what is that standard of perfection we're approaching that we're getting
towards?
Yeah, right. What are we getting towards that is supposedly the ruler that we're measuring this by? Well, as Christians, we're saying, yeah, God and his nature, like that is the goodness that we're measuring this by. Right. Someone without God, I don't know what they're measuring by.
Yeah, I mean, it really just has to come down to personal or societal preference of some sort if there is no God. And so what about those other two arguments that you mentioned, the cosmological and the fine-tuning? I like the cosmological as well, and I love the fine-tuning argument. For me, there's a lot of details, and you can get into a lot of the different I guess, numbers and the odds and probability of certain things being the way that they are, being fine-tuned. And it's kind of a two-sided, not two-sided, but maybe a two-part argument, because you've got the fine-tuning in the universe for human life, and then the fine-tuning of biological life as well. But maybe, is there one of those that you, or both of them, that you would like to kind of dive a little bit into?
Yeah. So the fine tuning argument, and you're right. I think they're part of it's more of a subset of a whole branch of just like teleological arguments or design sort of arguments. But yeah, the fine tuning argument that we cover is really about trying to explain the long odds of the fundamental constants and quantities being the way that they actually are, that they could have been radically different. In fact, all the odds say that they shouldn't have been exactly the way that they are. And so, yeah, as part of the argument, we walk through and we first define what fine tuning is, because a lot of people think, wait a minute, there's fine tuning. Well, that means there's a fine tuner, right? You can't have fine tuning without a fine tuner. And as much as I'd love to be on that bandwagon, the term fine tuning is actually not a controversial term. Like atheist scientists, they would agree. Yes, it appears that things have been fine tuned. I think I have a quote from Hawking as part of the course there in the presentation. But like he would agree, there's a number of scientists that say yes, it does appear that things have been finely tuned to set everything up so that there could be intelligent life. Now, really, all that means is that all these fundamental constants and quantities that are just sort of givens in what we know about physics and the natural laws, like the law of gravity and the weak nuclear force, and there's like over a dozen of these different constants and quantities. The low amount of entropy early in the early universe, that the amount of entropy had to be this exact amount. Otherwise, things from the Big Bang couldn't have gotten to where they are now. And it's almost like, okay, this is where we are now. Let's rewind the clock and see what must have been there at the beginning. And so it's just they call it an arbitrary quantity. We don't know why, but it must have been like this for things to work out the way they are now. Had it been other than that, things would be drastically different. There would be no life. And we talk about that, what the odds are of each one of these happening. The fine tuning talks about like if things were different by even one part in 10 to the X
80th or whatever. It's like then outrageous numbers.
They're huge numbers. These numbers are so big that you don't refer to them, by names anymore. It's 10 to the fill in the blank, exponent, because they're just so massive. That's a 1 followed by that many zeros. So 10 to the 17th is a 1 followed by 17 zeros. I think that's roughly the amount of seconds that have passed since the universe began 13.8 billion years ago, is like 10 to the 17th. Well, some of these numbers get into the 10 to the 80th, 10 to the 100th. I believe the odds of the low entropy existing by chance alone in the early universe just by chance is 1 in 10 to the 1,280th. Roger Penrose at Oxford, like he calculated this. Just, dude, that's an insane number, and that's not the only one. Like that had to be, this had to be, this had over a dozen of these had to be exactly the way they are. And if you take any single one of them, it's like the odds are way more infinitesimal than winning the lottery.
Yeah, to put it into perspective, like it's something like the number of particles or atoms in the entire universe is something like only 10 to the 80th or something like that, and yet you're talking about 10 to over 1,000.
Yeah. So, the other thing to keep in mind, which it isn't readily apparent maybe for most people, it wasn't for me when I first started looking into this. Like when you're looking at these numbers, 10 to the 80th versus 10 to the 100th. Well, that's only 20 more, right? Like, well, those are pretty close. They're probably close to the same size, right? Actually, no, like 10 to the 80th versus 10 to the 81st, that's a factor of 10.
10 times.
It's like just one number in the exponent means it's 10 times bigger. So
10.
Right. It goes up exponentially. Yeah. That's That's hard to wrap your mind around.
Another 0, and it's 10 times that larger number.
10 times that times 10 times that, and it's just, your brain can't even comprehend it. So part of the way to get this across is like, as part of my presentation, I took the time to put in, okay, this is what 10 to the 1,280th looks like on screen. And it goes 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, fills the whole screen up, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Like, that's just an astronomically big number. And like, there's only a few ways you can go to explain such fine tuning, right? It either had to happen by physical necessity, it had to happen by chance, or it happened by design. Premise 2 is that it didn't happen by necessity or chance, therefore design. And we get into the sort of arguments for why we think it's not physical necessity. In fact, we see that it could have been a lot of other ways. There's nothing we can draw on to say, well, it had to be this way, like fated or something. And then under that headline of chance, one would say, well, what if there's a multiverse? If there's a multiverse with a near infinite number of universes, surely one of those would have been life permitting. We just happen to live in one of those. So,
So we got lucky.
Yeah, we got lucky. But yeah, there's arguments against all that. Number one, there's actually no good evidence, no empirical evidence to even support a multiverse other than...
You have to have faith in a multiverse anyway.
Right.
It's like you're putting faith into something that, to avoid putting faith into God, you're putting faith into something else.
Yeah. Also, when we talk about, when they talk about a multiverse, they talk about some type of mechanism that continues to pop out new new universes, some universe generating system. This ultimately just kicks the can down the road because, well, what is this mechanism or machine or contraption or process or force that's producing all these? Likely that's going to need fine tuning as well.
Mm-hmm. And a creator.
Mm-hmm. So we're back to the problem.
Right.
It doesn't really solve the issue. So yeah, design.
Yeah. And philosophically, even that doesn't work, because if there's an infinite number of universes that we just happen to get lucky, that means there's also an infinite number of universes just like ours.
Right.
And yet, there's absolutely no way for us to observe any of that. And we're just postulating that, throwing that out there as some sort of random theory of here's something that's possible. Is there evidence? No, but it's maybe this is the case.
Yeah. And yeah, you could get really in the weeds with this, right? Because if you start talking about, are there an infinite number of universes and there's more and more being created and popped out? Okay, well, if these are happening in a sequential order, a one at a time, you can't have an actual infinite number that have come out then, right? Because how can you have an infinite regress? Philosophically, there's some good arguments against such a thing. Mm-hmm. So it would have to be near infinite, just a big number. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is the odds of us winning and getting a life-permitting universe are so incredibly far out that you would have to postulate that there's that big of a number, a sea, of universes. So it would have to be sufficiently large. It couldn't just be, well, maybe it's pumped out 300 universes. That's not enough. Okay, what about 5 billion? Not enough. You'd have to have a really, really, really big number of universes. Mm-hmm. There's no way of knowing. There's absolutely zero evidence and no way of knowing how many could possibly be.
And there's a number of these fine-tuning figures. One of them I think of is like the cosmological constant, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. I might sometimes mix these up, but it's the idea of the rate of the expansion of the universe. Mm-hmm. When it first came into existence. If it expanded any faster, then everything would have just, no planets, nothing would have actually solidified. Right. Versus if it had expanded any slower, then it would have caved back in on itself. Right. And been non-existent. And so that rate had to have been at this fine-tuned number of 1 in 10 to the, I don't know the number of that one, but
1 in 10 to the 100th or something.
So, something in that, one of those crazy numbers that we were just talking about. But that's just one of the examples.
Right.
I don't know if there's others that you can think of off the top of your head.
That's a common one. Yeah. And I'm no scientist. Believe it or not, I'm not a scientist by trade.
You play one on TV.
Every now and then, yeah. So there's that one. There's the weak nuclear force. So that's the force that keeps an atom sort of together. There's a number of these, but one thing that can come up is, okay, so maybe these numbers were off. Let's say all the dials were off from what they turned out to be. Okay, when you say life permitting, maybe you're just talking about like human life. Maybe there could be some other kind of life or something that could exist. But like, kind of like what you just alluded to, that really doesn't take into account the actual gravity, the gravity of the situation, right? Like, if these numbers are off, it's not that just, we don't have the ideal kind of conditions for life. It's that like planets don't form, stars can't form, chemistry can't be done. Like there would be just nothing, right. Space dust, if that, that's optimistic. These numbers, not just us life, but like any life is sort of dependent. Anything we could possibly conceive of as life is dependent on these numbers being fine-tuned. That's important to note.
Yeah, and then you said that the cosmological argument is your favorite argument. Can you talk about that for a second?
I love the simplicity, the surface simplicity of it. So anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Now, it doesn't say that cause is God, but there are certain things that you can infer from that conclusion, okay? If the universe is all time, space, and matter, and something that was outside of time, space, and matter caused the universe, then what you have is a cause that is by definition supernatural.
Right.
That gets you pretty darn close to God. Now, someone could say, maybe it was just some mindless force, some mechanism that just did it. There's a really strong argument that can be made that it must have been personal in nature. It must have had some kind of volitional will to create, to cause. It's a little bit intricate, so I probably won't dive into it now, but that is there. I made sure that I included some videos in the playlist in I think why the cause had to be personal, or why the cause is personal, something like that.
I mean, it's like if you're going from nothing to something, there had to have been a change. There had to have been a choice to go from something to nothing. Unless the only other option would be just necessity. It just had to have somehow happened.
Right. Yeah. So there's, and I'm probably going to screw this up because I'm not nearly as smart as the people I quote, but most causes, when they are sufficient to actually cause something, they do so. Once something has enough energy to release its cause to cause the effect, it does so. It can't just withhold that and then decide to do it. Otherwise, it has some kind of free will, some volition. Now, if before time began, right, and that's even an incorrect thing to say, before time. Well, there is no before. It'd be without time, sans the universe, right? If there was this force, this supernatural cause, there is no time that it would be acting on to sort of move up to a point where it said, okay, I finally charged the batteries and now the universe is going to pop out. That means that whatever was there was sufficient at any time to just cause the universe. Right. So one has to ask, why did the universe begin to exist 13.8 billion years ago instead of 29 billion years ago, or instead of 3 days ago? You know what I mean? Like, right. It could have been, so it happened exactly, let's just say 13.8 billion years ago. That strongly implies, I think, that there was some kind of choice, some volition, on the part of this supernatural cause. Sounds a lot like God, right? I mean, when you talk about God, the Bible's idea of what God is: timeless, spaceless, immaterial, super powerful because he created out of nothing, creation ex nihilo. That's the Christian belief. That's the Christian idea of what God is. So I like Kalam because it gets you to the supernatural cause of the universe. And when we move on eventually in like session 3, we talk about Jesus, the resurrection. well, okay, this guy did miracles, he healed people, and then he supposedly came back from the dead. He was crucified, and then what? Turned into some zombie and came back to life and whatever. Like, oh, that seems far out. Okay. But if we've already covered the idea that the supernatural exists, it's incredibly powerful, God created out of nothing in the beginning, do you think that the odd resurrection would be something he couldn't manage? You know what I mean? Well, no. I think probably the biggest miracle that ever happened was the let there be light. Right? The moment of creation was parting a Red Sea for Moses and the Israelites is nothing compared to that. That's just playing in the sandbox,
Yeah, it's like when we talk about supernatural, everybody, like, that's a common word nowadays, but we don't really always think about what it means. We think, oh, supernatural, you're just talking about God or spirits or whatever like that. But what we're talking about here is, and really this is where it comes from, is that it's beyond nature.
Beyond nature, yeah.
And so you can't have natural laws causing something if there is no nature. Right? Natural laws just describe what happens. They don't actually cause anything to come into existence. And so if there was nothing, no space-time, no matter, then all of a sudden there was, then whatever caused it couldn't be, like you mentioned, couldn't be in time. It couldn't be matter itself.
Right.
It couldn't be, it has to be beyond space, time, and matter, which those are the natural things, because those didn't exist. So it couldn't be one of those things. So it had to be above it,
right.
Super above, super outside of, beyond nature. And so that's what we're talking about. And yes, that's referring to God and beyond what we know as nature, but it's also more of a technical term that sometimes we don't necessarily think about very often. So, yeah. And so, okay, so those arguments really bring us, and you kind of alluded a little bit to this, talking about Jesus as God, the resurrected and Son of God. But how then, like, if those arguments are towards for the existence of God, what do you do? How do you get from God exists to Jesus is that God and Christianity is true?
It's a great question. So, as far as the transition being smooth in the class, I don't know that, I have it that smooth. I mean, it's split up. Well, that's session 2. We're going to talk about Jesus next week, guys. Now, in a conversation you're having with, say, an unbeliever or skeptic, it's going to be, okay, well, if we can agree then that that God exists, or he likely exists, you got to kind of think about, well, would he have made himself known to his creation? Are his fingerprints present in the clay? Is there some way for us to reason to him? Has he shown signs that he exists? What can we look at? Well, I mean, there's a handful of times that, like, a monotheistic God has supposedly interacted with humans. We've got Judaism, we've got Christianity, we've got Islam, right? Mm-hmm. We live in the U.S. There's a church on every corner. You might as well start with your investigation with Christianity. I would argue it would be the place to start, because no one really has impacted human history more than Jesus Christ. Greg Koukl has a great book on that. I think J. Warner Wallace has a great book on that. Person of Interest, I think, is J. Warner Wallace.
Story of Reality.
Yeah, story. Yeah, yeah. So, there's some great books on that topic. But I mean, if you just look at it, Jesus has impacted the world in so many ways that people don't even realize. People that aren't even Christians, people that might be atheists, like, pretty much everyone has to concede, whether you agree with the claims made about him or not, that he has had a huge impact. Mm-hmm. And when you go back and think, okay, his ministry was about 3 years. His closest disciples were mostly fishermen and people that were not hugely influential. Right. And that he lived in a sort of backwater part of the Roman Empire, that, like, he didn't live in Rome. He wasn't a king. He was a sort of itinerant preacher that, drew some followings here and there. Mm-hmm. ultimately they turned on him because he wasn't exactly what they wanted, and was crucified. And boy, crucifixion was like the most shameful, sort of way to go. Like, how did this guy turn into such a, change, and an influential person in human history? It demands some kind of an investigation. And like, you can come down on multiple sides, but like, if you just stick your head in the sand and say, nah, I don't really care. Like, boy, you've got to have some curiosity about that. So yeah, first I would say, and this is kind of how we move in the course of, well, what did Jesus say about himself? What are the claims that he made? And this, I'm once again stealing from people way smarter than me. C.S. Lewis, he came up with the famous trilemma.
Oh yeah.
So
liar, lunatic, or Lord.
Yeah, either Jesus lied about who he was, that he wasn't really God, he just is lying about and making up all these claims, or he was crazy, he was a lunatic, he just thought he was, he clearly wasn't, but he thought he was, or he was Lord. He actually was who he said he was. So, he's trying to get rid of any outs that someone has to say, well, I want to take this a la carte style. I like Jesus's teachings. I like that he loved people. I don't like that he had these weird claims about being Son of God, being able to forgive sins. I don't know what to do with all these healing stories and supernatural stuff that he did. I'm going to leave those here. I'll take these and be on my merry way. Yeah. Lewis didn't want people doing that. He said, no, you need to take him on his own terms. And these were his terms. Since Lewis, there's been another idea that perhaps he was just legend, well, Jesus probably was just a good, itinerant teacher and a preacher and whatever, and he had some great ideas, and it was just either his disciples or someone later who just made up, they turned it all into legend. And we kind of talk about that idea. There's a historian, A.N. Sherwin-White, who, he's like I think he was a literary historian. 60s, mid to late 60s. Anyways, he studied this topic, and he came to the conclusion, studying all kinds of different biographies and stuff, Roman biographies and biographies contemporary with Jesus, and when this literature, these gospel accounts would have come out. And he came to the conclusion that even though you can observe that legend does grow over time, right, in some of these biographies, it would take at least 2 generations or more for legend to really move in and supplant historical truth. Right. And so, okay, let's look at when these were written then. Well, we have really great reason to believe that these gospel accounts were written within the lifetime of the disciples, certainly within their lifetime, much less than 2 generations later. Yeah. But we have creeds, found in 1 Corinthians, that date back to within 5 years of the crucifixion itself, where they're calling Jesus God. Jesus was, crucified and buried and rose again, like that he appeared to these people, and those people appeared to 500 once. He appeared to me, appeared to James. These accounts are not legendary. So then you have to move on to the disciples. We're like, okay, well, were they just making this up? Maybe this was just all lies that they specifically made up, since it's happened within their lifetime. All right. Well, what would have been their reason? Like, what's their motivation? Are they going after money or women? The chicks love it when, I don't know. What is their motivation for making all this up? If you look at the culture, the Jewish culture, it's not exactly like Christian culture today in the U.S. Jewish culture, in that context, they go to synagogue, they all live their life, they're all Jewish, if you all of a sudden start espousing some heretical belief that takes you outside of Judaism, you're kind of not part of us anymore. Good luck. You're going to be a social outcast. History goes on to show that, like, there was great persecution for the early church. Jesus himself, according to the disciples, promised persecution for them. He said, like, if they're persecuting me, they're going to persecute you too.
Just like they did the prophets of old.
Yeah, it's bound to happen. Like, that's part of the reason why we think, like, yeah, Jesus would have been definitely evil, right? If he knew this was false, and he's even telling them, Hey, guess what? These lies that I'm teaching to you guys, yeah, it's gonna bite you bad.
Yeah, it kind of ruins the whole Jesus is a good moral teacher thing.
Yeah, he's promising that they're gonna come down on you guys like white on red.
For you.
Yeah, man, oh man. So what did the disciples have to gain from making all this up? Like, I just don't see it. Much of a good reason to think that. Yeah. So we talk about that. We talk through that. There's great, books on that. Cold Case Christianity is a really good one.
One of the things, it's what do they get out of it? Well, they got persecuted, they got beaten, tortured, killed for it, and many of them martyred for it. And you might say something like, well, plenty of people die for a lie. Muslim terrorists, Islamic terrorists are flying planes into buildings and stuff because they believe in Islam, but they think it's true, right? The disciples were in a position where they would know whether it's true. They wouldn't die for something that they knew would be a lie, and a lie that they would have made up themselves.
Yeah, you or I can sit around and talk about like, well, my faith is so strong and I'm so resolute in this that I would be willing to give my life for this. Mm-hmm. Like that's one kind of testimony. That's one kind of faith. Theirs is different. It's just fundamentally different. They were eyewitnesses to this stuff, or at least they were reporting that they were eyewitnesses. Either way, they know if they either witnessed this or we're making it up, we didn't witness any of this. They are in a position to know the actual truth of the matter. The only other get around that is to say they were fooled somehow, that they were bamboozled by Jesus or his twin brother, or, whatever kind of alternate theory, to the resurrection you want to go with. But they are in a unique position to know, these disciples, what happened. So yeah, I find it very unbelievable that that all of them would go through this, concoct this sort of lie, make up this story, and then never seemingly recant or say, yeah, it's just joking, guys, we made it all up. On my deathbed, coming clean finally to someone. The persecution that they suffered from the Jews and from the Romans, boy, those are two parties that would be very interested in publicizing, like, yeah, here we have, Barnabas, and he said he made it all up. Let's get the word out. There's zero historical evidence to show that any of those guys ever came in. Yeah.
And to say that it's all a conspiracy, I think it was Chuck Colson that talked about, who's part of the Watergate conspiracy, and he's like, there's a dozen guys involved in that, and they couldn't keep their mouths shut and without blabbing, within a few weeks, much less years and years for the rest of their lives, and to the grave,
right,
for that matter. So
yeah, J. Warner Wallace in his book Cold Case Christianity, he talks about this idea of a conspiracy, and he talks about some key factors, that are, to have a successful conspiracy, it has to be for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. The longer this drags on for, it's almost inevitable it's going to come out at some point. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we've gone 2,000 years now with this conspiracy, that's it's very unrealistic. That there has to be very few people, like preferably just one, involved. Right. Any more than one, now you have weak links that we can lean on, and someone's going to break and someone's going to give it up. Okay, well, we had 12 guys minimally, his closest disciples. Jesus appeared to 500 at one. Like, how many people are in this conspiracy? Like, that's a lot more than one.
Yeah.
We don't have any signs here that they broke. Okay. Means to communicate almost instantly. If you and I have a conspiracy and then we go our separate ways and we need to tell this lie convincingly, well, every time you're retelling it, I'm retelling it, we need to make sure we're retelling. And if I added this extra detail in, man, I better get on the phone with Bill and let him know, hey, guess what? The story has this detail now. You added in your version too, okay? Well, these guys dispersed, from Jerusalem. They went in all different directions. Mm-hmm. Christianity spread all over, the known world.
As far as like India, Thomas, they think went all the way to India and all over the place.
And the gospel that's being preached there is the gospel that's being preached here, and the gospel that's being preached there. And
they just had their cell phones, right? They just texted each other.
It could be. I mean, if Jesus was an alien and he gave them the technology to do it, now we're getting. I didn't bring my tinfoil hat. I'm sorry. I left it in the truck. But yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it being conspiracy. I don't understand what the motivation would be for them to make it all up. So then you move on to the next point. Okay, they were telling the truth, but what we have now isn't the truth, right? Maybe it started off as a truth, but scribes and this game of telephone over the ages, how do we know that what we have now is what they wrote 2,000 years ago, right? That's the next sort of hurdle. Okay, well, textual criticism, Wes Huff, who's sort of gotten famous recently. He's done great work in this to show, what we have now is 90 whatever percent likely to be exactly what they wrote. The fact that we don't actually have the autographs, it sounds weird to say this, but the fact that we don't have the original autographs is actually probably a good thing. If we only had an autograph, right, the original, there'd be no need for copies. You just have that original. Right. And you would take that as sacred, and that could very easily be doctored and messed with.
Someone could change it, and then now we'll see.
It's the one and only original, and I know it, and you all need to abide by it. And I just wrote down Dan's King forever, and see, it says it, words of Jesus. He wrote that himself. But the fact that we don't have the original, we actually have a ton of copies, tons and tons of copies that are from all over the place, allow us to be able to compare and go back and say, okay, well, the original would have said this, or this is what it would have likely said. And there really is no significant doctrine that is in dispute, or under scrutiny here, because they're able to just get so close to what it would have been.
I mean, if you have that many copies of it, if you make one change to one of them, you'd have to make it to all thousands of the copies that are out there. That how are you going to have access to that? They've dispersed, they've spread out, and so the bottom line is that it's like when a change has been made, we can test it against all of these others and say, okay, that's just that version. And so there might be all sorts of variants.
Yep.
But the way we know that is because there are so many copies, this textual criticism, we can compare all of these, kind of like I think J. Warner Wallace again talks about the different cell phone messages. Let's meet at Main Street at 5 p.m. And so it's like you see meet at Main Street at 6 p.m. on one, and 5 a.m. on another, but on 5. So it's like all these little changes, but you can see that most of it, except for this one little detail, is the same. And then in a different manuscript, you see, well, that detail is the same as the others, but now you have this one other detail over here that's just a little bit different. And so it's like you can, by looking at and comparing all of these, and this is what textual criticism is, you can see what, like you were saying, what it must have actually, the originals, the autographs must have originally said.
Right. Yeah, and ultimately that's the basis, for our faith, right? Is understanding what these originals would have said. And when I think there's a lot of Christians probably in the church that don't understand where our Bible comes from, how we have what we have, how translations work. When we go over this in class, there can be some raised eyebrows sometimes, and maybe a little bit of I don't know about all this. What are you talking? You're providing answers to a problem I didn't even know was a problem. So it's interesting to go through that roller coaster with people, ride it along and say, well, you might not have realized it, but some people say this about our faith. Oh no, but there's an answer. Oh yay.
And what's the benefit of that? Being able to lay that out to them of have you had someone that's been kind of torn or kind of really shaken by one of these things that you've brought up that they never really thought about, or should we just kind of keep that swept under the rug or whatever? Your faith is good, so I'm not going to tell you about this part of it. Let's just rest on that. What should we do with that? I think
it's good for everyone to grow, and growing sometimes is painful, right? It is a painful process sometimes. So yeah, growth is good. It is good to grow in not only in your faith, also in your knowledge.
Yeah.
if you're, let's say you're married, right? You are married. Let's say, let's say, you know what, babe, I really enjoy you. I really love you and love being around you. And she's like, oh, okay, well, let's have a conversation. I can tell you about all the things I like. I'll tell you more about it. No. I don't want to know about you. I just wanted you to know that I love you. Okay, well, then you'd want to know, well, we don't need conversation. I don't want to learn more. I just want to be with you. It's like, okay, well, these things don't really go hand in hand. Like one would necessarily lead to the other, you know. If I love God, if I am thankful to him for his mercy and his grace, if I'm, set myself up to be a disciple of Jesus, that means I want to learn about Jesus. I want to learn about God. I want to worship God with all of my my mind, as well as my heart, my soul, my spirit, all of my being. And so, yeah, sometimes the mind is neglected to do the actual learning. And that gets shown to be painfully true sometimes when we're having those conversations with loved ones or with coworkers or friends or some other people. They bring up these objections or these supposed problems. Well, why can I even trust that? Don't you know the Bible is like a 2,000-year-old game of telephone? No, it's not.
It's
no. Okay, well, maybe if you knew something about it, you could explain to them why that's not the case, rather than just say, look, you just need to take it on faith. It's just a blind leap of faith. You don't need evidence or reasons or anything else, just faith. Well, I think the loving, gracious, charitable thing to do is to sort of meet people where they're at. They have objections, they need evidence. Give them some evidence. Answer those questions. And I try and preface, there's a lot of information to take in 6 short sessions. So I try and lower the expectation to say, look, you're not going to memorize all the material in here. It's just not going to happen. I don't have it memorized. I have to look at my notes. I have to review and read and bone up every time. But like knowing that these exist as resources. And so when you get in those conversations, you can say, ooh, there's actually an answer to that. Let's talk about that next week. I'll buy you a coffee. That can be hugely helpful. But yeah, it's an important thing to be able to lovingly answer questions and objections that people have, rather than just relying on this sort of blind leap of faith. There's a great example of it when Thomas is sort of doubting, right? So if you ask yourself, like, okay, what did Thomas have before Jesus came and showed himself to Thomas specifically? What evidence did Thomas have that Jesus had returned, that he was resurrected? Well, his friends had told him that, right? They said, hey, this is what we saw. This is what we heard. This is what Jesus said. Like, he's back. He rose from the dead. He had apostolic witness, right? What do we have? Apostolic witness. We have the same. But he's like, no, that's not enough. I need more. I need I have questions that need answering. I need Jesus to be here right now with me. I need to, see the wound in his side. I need to feel the holes in his hands. So naturally, Jesus showed up and said, Thomas, I curse you to hell. You're going straight to hell because you didn't have blind faith. No, he gave him the evidence he needed, right? But he did say, blessed are those that don't need to see me, right? That don't need to witness this firsthand, because so those that come after, right, that can trust in the apostolic witness, the eyewitness accounts, blessed are they. Jesus is likely not going to visit each and every single one of us personally to try and, get us to be his follower, which is why, we're blessed to have scripture. We're blessed to have this all written down and attested. We can rely on it. It's trustworthy.
Yeah. And another example like that is John the Baptist, who Jesus' own cousin leapt in the womb in the presence of Jesus. And he saw, he baptized him, and the Holy Spirit came down in the form of a dove, and the voice came from heaven. This is my son. Listen to him. And yet when he was in prison, he sent messengers to Jesus and said, are you the one?
Yeah.
And so even he was doubting, and Jesus didn't curse him. Jesus didn't shame him. Jesus said, look, here's the evidence. Here's the miracles. Tell him everything that you see.
Right.
And that's what they did. And so, but yeah, I think, a lot of times it's like, sometimes we might get nervous about showing and saying, hey, look, there are different variants in the manuscripts, and there is this question or this problem, but there's an answer. Because the thing is that, this is a safe environment for that. I think we need, as Christians and as the church, we need to be more open to questions and have a question and answer type of situation, even at church services sometimes. And because that's where your questions can get answered, because the chances are eventually you're probably going to come across those questions elsewhere on social media or in the culture somewhere. And if you don't have that foundation, if you can't ask those questions and you had never heard it in the first place, and you're not in that safe space to figure out the answers, then maybe that might have a little bit more of an effect, and shake you a little bit more, as opposed to like, no, I've heard this already. Yeah, there's an answer to it. I'm confident. I heard someone saying just the other day, it's like someone can, when you're confident about something, it doesn't matter how much someone might tell you. People could argue with me to all they want about like the earth is flat, and I'm like, okay, whatever you say, but I'm confident that it's not. Right, but you're not threatening to me. Right. And if you can be confident in your faith, then those types of things, that challenges, are not really going to shake you very much. Right. So, well,
you hit on, before we move on, you hit on a great point though. There's a friend of mine recently. We had a conversation from, he's a friend from a ways back that we haven't talked in a lot of years. And he wanted to talk about God and questions about Christianity and these tough problems, right? And so when we started talking through some things, it seems that he just had a wrong idea about who God is and what God can do, what he's capable of, what his will is, what his intentions are with, he just had a bad concept. He went on to explain to me how, he grew up in the South and he went to, I think maybe a Southern Baptist church or just a little church, whatever. And like he and his, youth group, they had these kind of questions. It was a sort of church and atmosphere where we don't like questions. We don't want questions. If you have questions, it is because you are an unbeliever or you don't have faith.
Have enough faith.
If you have questions, keep it to yourself. Like, this is not a place for questions. Or we're going to take, if you're asking us questions, we're going to take that as some kind of a challenge, or, you're questioning our authority or something. And it's like, no, church should be a place for questions. Like, if you can't, if what we're teaching and preaching and what we're reading in Scripture is true, it should be able to withstand some scrutiny. We should be able to question it and it have some answers. Right. And he shared with me that everyone that was in that youth group, as far as he knows, is not a Christian today, and that even he is sort of far from God and not sure about what he believes anymore. And I think, man, what a disservice. I mean, God bless that church for the good things that they were doing, but there are some definite blind spots, right? That church and probably a lot of churches have, that like, we're not training and teaching people to be able to answer and ask good questions. And I think the implicit, the implied answer here, right, if we're not answering questions, is that we don't have answers to those questions. We don't want you to ask these questions because we don't have any answers. And that's, and that's just not the case. There are great answers for all of this. So it's training in apologetics, man. That's why my ministry
exists. Evidence, and that we can put that trust in the evidence, and that's really what faith is. It's not, some of these churches that have those don't question this is because they think that having doubts and questions is the opposite of faith, and it's not. Right. The faith is putting your trust in something that you have good evidence to believe is true. Right. And I think that we have a misconception of whether it's what God's really like or what faith is really supposed to be. Right. I've read you read through like Hebrews 11 and the heroes of the faith type of chapter, and it's like, what do they all have in common? God told them something. they trusted in what they had seen of God in the past enough to say, okay, God, I will trust you in this. I have faith.
Right.
That's what faith is, right? So we're kind of running out of some time here, but let's take it home. Like, where do you go from there, and then kind of how do you close out your
the final three sessions?
Sessions.
We'll fast forward through the second half. All right, so sessions 4 and 5 are both very similar. There's just so many different hard questions or objections to Christianity that it takes 2 sessions to really go through those and give them. Boy, you could have an entire course on just one of these objections, right? But like, we try and flesh these out a little bit deeper and let people ask and have some back and forth. The biggest, I think, by far is the problem of evil and suffering. Like, if God is all powerful and he's all good, why is there evil? Why can't he just eradicate it? Why can't he get rid of that? There are great answers to this, but it's not in a 10-second clip.
Yeah. And that's part of the problem with our culture right now is this soundbite TikTok culture. Everything has to be like they drop a 30-second bomb to try to destroy someone's faith, and there are plenty of answers. It's just you just can't always cram them into that same 30-second period.
Yeah. So yeah, we try and unpack that, and there's different ways to answer it, and it kind of depends on the person asking this question and where they're coming from. Are they really struggling with the emotional impact of this evil and why a good God would allow that? Or is it really a purely intellectual side, or at least they think it's a purely intellectual side? And we're going to have different responses to each one. So we kind of unpack that over the course of a session. We talk about the problem of the unevangelized. If, what about people that have never heard of Jesus? When this is all over and we're at the judgment, do they go straight to hell simply because they never heard about Jesus? Is that really, how is that loving? It's sort of an internal critique of the Christian faith, right? Well, Bill, if what you're saying about, the Bible and God and Scripture is true, then what that means is that these Aborigines somewhere on this remote island that have never heard about Jesus, they're going to go to hell just because they never heard about Jesus. How do you answer that? That's a pretty common objection that gets brought up, almost as common as the problem of evil and suffering. So we take a while to sort of unpack
Well, how do you answer that? Because real quick, I know we're kind of over time, but like, I know it's probably not.
Give me another hour, Bill.
30 seconds. Well, but I think about this like as a I studied missions in college. It was one of my majors. And we've talked about like, well, if they don't hear, then God gives them this extra grace. Maybe is that an option? Because then I'm like, okay, well, does that mean that if we go preach Christ and then they say no, now we've just actually done them a disservice?
Shoot, we got them unsaved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you answer that? I've had a discussion, I think back when I interviewed Bobby Conway about this, and he had a pretty good response. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but what would you say to that?
So
in 30 seconds.
Unpacking an hour of talking in 30 seconds. Doug's favorite thing is in a nutshell, right? Yeah. Doug Grotice, I think, loves that phrase. So in a nutshell, here's what you do. No, I'm being facetious. So first you have to set expectations, right? The way that Scripture is authoritative. So we need to derive what we're getting from Scripture. Unfortunately, Scripture is not explicit on what happens to these unreached people groups. Nowhere does Jesus say, go out, because if they don't hear about me, I'm sending them straight to hell. Or don't go out, because if they don't hear about me, then my grace is going to be sufficient and they're going straight to heaven. So keep it to yourselves. He doesn't say that. So there's certain things you're going to have to look in Scripture and sort of figure out. One thing to keep in mind, and this is where I usually started, is, well, what is it that sends people to hell versus sending them to hell? Like, what is God judging on in the first place? Is God judging on the things that you've heard or not heard, or is he judging on sin? Right? So what is it that sends you to hell? The answer is sin. Sin sends people to hell. Sins against God. The Aborigines on an unheard, of island in the middle of nowhere, whatever, they've sinned. We've all sinned and fall short of the glory. That is the thing that gets us the ticket to hell. It is only God's grace that gets us a pardon. So number one, it's not the not hearing part doesn't send you there. It's the sinning part that sends you there. The hearing part could save, It's not guaranteed because not everyone that hears actually accepts, right? So that's important to note. Next part, grace. Is grace owed to everyone? Well, by definition, grace is unmerited favor. So if it's not merited, how can it be owed to everybody? You think about, pardons. If the governor issues a pardon for someone, is he morally obligated then to give a pardon to everybody? Well, he gave it to this one guy. Why can't he give it to all the other inmates? That's not fair. None of them should get it then. No one would say that. I don't think anyone recognizes that. It's his pardon to give with, as he wants. There's a scripture that talks about all these different workers, that this guy hired, and he hired them at different times throughout the day to come back and get his harvest in. And Jesus tells this parable, and I never understood this. It boggled my mind because it is so anti how our culture sees things. But he ended up paying each one of these guys the same amount of money. And when the guy who was there since early morning saw that he was making the same as the guy who just rolled in an hour ago, he's like, wait a minute, this isn't fair. How is this fair? I was here all day. I'm making the same as the guy that got here at the very end. And the owner kind of lambasted him and said, listen, it's my money. And this is what we agreed on. How you're going to tell me that, I'm not justified in spending my money how I want. Because to me, that does kind of make sense. I feel like, that guy's got a point. He should have, that's not a fair wage, but that is actually a picture of grace. That it is God's gift of grace, and I can't tell God how to give his grace. I'm not got the authority for God, neither are you, neither is anyone else. God gets to give grace to whoever he wants. So there's that. Then there's just a number of possible answers I go through, and there's probably about half a dozen ways that you can sort of look at this. Some are maybe more appealing than others. There's a sort of Molinist response. There's a number of different ways, but we kind of walk through all of them, and I don't strongly advocate for any one over the other. But
it's hard to know for it's really hard to.
It's speculative.
You can have what you think makes the most sense as long as you have a reason, a biblical reason for it. But I think it's really like you said, speculative. I think this makes sense, but again, I'm not God. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what's going on in his mind and how he's struck me. It's just we can make educated guesses, but sometimes we just have to be okay with not knowing because we're not the omniscient one.
Right. Well, and I close that section out with two final points to bring up. Number one, even if we could determine that maybe some people are unfairly, not getting their chance at grace, because they haven't heard about Jesus, you're not in that people group. You have heard about Jesus. You're hearing about him right now. What are you going to do? Are you going to stand on some sort of moral high ground and say, well, since they're not getting it, I'm not taking it either. I'm going to go to hell with those people just in solidarity. Don't let that keep you from salvation. You know what I mean? Number two, if you think that really is how it works, that God is just they're all going to go to hell because they didn't hear. Boy, that should motivate all of us to go into the missions field and get the word out. That should light a fire under all of us if you really think that's how it works. So become a Christian right now and sign up for missions work. That's what you your sort of objections lead to. Those are the 2 points. Real quickly going through the rest. We talk a little bit about Darwinian evolution, which is a whole subject. We get into some of the science. It's something that people in school have heard about, and they're going to continue hearing about, and their kids are going to hear about. So we talk about some different ways to be able to think about that, process that, tackle that. We talk about the Council of Nicaea, which of course is where Christianity was invented, and the Bible was all put together. No, of course we talk about the historical Council of, not the conspiracy Council of Nicaea, but the actual Council of Nicaea that took place. There are a number of eyewitness biographical, autobiographical accounts that say I was there. Here's what happened. And you can read them and compare them line by line. And like, we know what happened there.
Right.
The Bible was not constructed and put together there. They didn't decide Jesus, well, he was just a good dude. Hey, you want to make him God? Yeah, let's make him God. All in favor? Okay, Jesus was God. That's not how it worked. Right. They were addressing a very specific heresy, which through modern eyes, when you go back and read what they were debating, I mean, maybe I'm a softie, but I'm like, guys, that's not, is that really the thing we're going to like throw fists over? You know, like, I don't think it's a huge deal, but, maybe I'm a heretic. I don't know, but it's either way. So the idea was not whether Jesus was divine. It was his specific level of divinity. This guy, Arius? Yeah, I think it was Arius. The Arian heresy.
Right.
I think his name was Arius. Anyway, he was espousing some belief that Jesus, though divine, was a created being. He was created by the Father. So he wasn't co-eternal. He was like, they were both God, both divine, but him slightly less divine.
Which is kind of what the Jehovah's Witness believe is
a
form of Arianism.
Frankly, I think if you ask the average churchgoer, they might not be able to differentiate between this either, because begotten, I think to a lot of people means, yeah, he begot him, meaning he like created him. I think a lot of people probably would confuse that and think that's what it means.
Not know what to say in response to that.
Yeah.
Not really had thought through it before.
So maybe I'm a little more charitable in how I look at it, how someone might be confused on that. Maybe there's no excuse for Arius being a church leader. He should have known better. Anyways, that was what the debate was all about. They all convened in this council to discuss how they can, because a big rift was going to form. Constantine, who was a new Christian at the time, said, hey, it's my empire and Christianity is my faith. I don't want it splintering and creating this big, rift. So let's get everyone together, all the big movers and shakers. They had, I think, over 300 different bishops from all around, the empire come to sort of have it out and figure out, look, we all need to get on the same page. What is it that the scripture says? What do we believe with this? And so they went through it for, I don't know, was it a few days or a few weeks? It was over the course of some period of time. At the end of it, I think there was 3 who stuck with Arius, including Arius, and they were excommunicated from the church. Everyone else signed off on what became known as the Nicene Creed. And in the course, we actually read the Nicene Creed, and okay, this is what they came up with. This is what the Council of Nicaea produced, not the Bible.
Right.
Yeah, and so we talk about that. We talk about divine hiddenness, the problem of divine hiddenness. If God's real, if he exists, why isn't he more obvious? Like, why isn't there even more evidence of his, existence? Why is he hidden? Why is he so hidden himself? I mean, he could just come down right now and just say, look, there's been a lot of debate about me, but rest assured I'm real, okay? Now believe in me and believe my son. He could do that, right? Why doesn't he? So we kind of talk about that objection. And then I think finally we tackle a sort of more modern, it's actually just a recycled, as you said, a recycled ideas that like, actually Jesus and the resurrection story and, just his whole, the legend of Jesus is actually borrowed from earlier pagan myths and previous, old world deities and stuff. Mithras and Horus and all these kind of things. He's just a ripoff of these others. You see these memes online all the time.
Right.
As a Christian a number of years ago before I discovered apologetics, I saw them and I was troubled by them and angry and upset at them. And I don't know how to answer that. And keep scrolling,
and so many of them don't actually have any weight if you actually look into it. There's like, there might be almost a similarity, but really it's like they're really pulling at straws to try to grasping at straw, trying to.
Yeah. In the course, we just take one. We just say, okay, Horus seems to be the most common and the most, most commonly sort of compared. So we just take that one and we go back and historically we say, okay, Jesus was this, Horus, no. Okay, Jesus was this, Horus, nope. Jesus was, in line by line. Okay, what are all the claims that are being made here? Are any of these true?
Right.
Turns out of like the 10 or 12 claims, one of them is like a half-truth. The rest are just patently false. And these are, it's not like just my opinion. These are public. You can go online and look at, the ancient myths.
A lot of the ones that they say Jesus is a copycat myth of they actually came later. And so
Right.
if anything, they're pulling from the story of Jesus himself and not the other way around.
Yeah, they can show that over time these early pagan deities and myths started here, and then they kind of went along, and there was maybe some variation, and then Jesus happened, and then all of a sudden, actually we're more like Jesus.
Yeah.
Actually we had a virgin birth too. Oh, actually we had a resurrection. Like, well, wait a minute. Before Jesus, none of this was ever around. So
I just want to be like Jesus.
So
we all just want to be just like Jesus.
Yeah. What would Jesus do? Yeah, I didn't realize. That's a good point. Anyway, the final session then is all about tactics. Conversationally, how can you actually sit down, talk, interact? We learn tons of like what data, right? Here's the what of apologetics. Now we kind of learn a little bit of the how. What's a good way to get any of this into play? How do we relate to people? How do we ask good questions? How do we listen well? They say like an apologist should be doing about 90% listening in a conversation and about 10% talking. Part of that is, well, how am I going to develop some compelling case for Christianity for you if I don't know anything about where you're coming from, what you believe? Like, it's going to take laying some groundwork, some foundation, relationship, rapport, and figuring out where you're coming from.
Before trying to answer the argument or whatever, right?
And it just takes good listening. I mean, how I've done it, I've actually like pulled out a notebook or said, "Hey, I've got to take my phone out. I promise I'm not doing Candy Crush. I'm taking some notes here because like I actually do care about you. We're talking about a very important thing. In my opinion, there's nothing more important than the kind of subject we're talking about. So I'm going to take some notes here just so that I can remember and give you the kind of attention that I think this deserves." And man, who's going to say no to that? You know what I mean? Who's going to be offended that what you're like so interested in me and what I have to say that you want to take notes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sure. So yeah, that's kind of where we ended.
Good. All right. Well, so here's the thing. We've mentioned a ton of different resources and books, and I'll try to put a bunch of those in the show notes and stuff. But do you recommend? First of all, do you recommend a starting point, since only people locally can attend the course? Like, what is there one particular starting point that you would recommend, and then also tell us maybe how they could, find Apologetics 517, and maybe follow you online.
Yeah. So I'll start with the second part first, just to throw you off. So if you want to find me online, Apologetics 517, we've got a Facebook page that I check in on. I'm not super active every hour or anything, maybe once a day. And then I've also got a YouTube channel, really not putting out much in the way of original content, at least not yet. But once again, I've curated a number of playlists there. That moves into the second part. So as far as apologetics resources, what I would recommend off the start, once again, we should tailor it to the individual, right? So like, are you someone who prefers to do reading? I recognize today's culture, maybe not that many people are readers, and they prefer to listen to podcasts or, watch videos, whatever. That's fine. Most of the podcasts and videos you're going to watch are derived from the books. So you could go to primary source stuff and get it firsthand in books. But if you're looking for podcasts or episodes or whatever, the YouTube channel that I've put together, Apologetics 517, you can start at those playlists. Figure out the sort of topic or subject you're interested in and start watching those videos. I think pretty much all of the videos and ministries that I've taken from and put in there, like, they're ministries I would recommend. Stand to Reason, J. Warner Wallace and his ministry, Sean McDowell and his ministry, Reasonable Faith, William Lane Craig, the J.P. Moreland. There's a lot of good stuff in there to be mined. Now, as far as, say, books, one of the first, I think, apologetics books I read was On Guard by William Lane Craig, and it goes through kind of what the course does, like arguments for God, arguments for Jesus, answers to some objections in there, and it's almost meant to be done as a group. There are some going deeper questions and group questions to ask. So that could be a place to start. Our mutual friend, Doug Grotice, he has a big book of apologetics.
Oh, yeah.
That thing is like an
800
Encyclopedia Britannica. Not only could you use it as a doorstop in an emergency, but like self-defense. And it's certainly more expansive than, say, like On Guard with William Lane Craig.
Goes into a lot of depth on a lot.
Yeah,
of issues,
you can get a ton of depth and use it almost as like reference material to, hey, I was wondering about this, and flip to that section. So yeah, there's some really really good and probably other books that you'll put in the description will be fine too. But yeah, shoot, reach out to Bill, reach out to me through Facebook. I'm sure we can steer you in the right direction.
That's right. Yeah. And so, but all right. I mean, I think this has been a great conversation and a lot of things to think about. We've gone way over, but yeah, I think it's got a lot of good stuff.
Don't get me started talking about apologetics, man. I'll be.
I know. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Dan. It's been a pleasure to have you, and just such great insight. So
yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks. Thanks for having me, Bill.
My pleasure. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, if you got something out of it, just make sure to share it with your friends. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all of the social media, and be sure to visit our website, encounteringtruth.org, of course. And then, and speaking of resources, there's a whole bunch of resources on the website, books, videos, podcasts, the works. And so visit the website. And then, of course, remember, as always, we make it our goal to examine the evidence, engage culture, and encounter Jesus. God bless. We'll see you next time.